Everyone is watching Larry Fink and BlackRock buying Bitcoin, but they're missing something important. And it's getting crazier and crazier. The Bitcoin market is going absolutely wild because everyone is buying as much Bitcoin as they possibly can. And now imagine this. There's a new company announcing that it will buy Bitcoin every 24 hours. Crazy, right? That this is now happening daily. And who knows, maybe there's more to it than meets the eye. Maybe they're planning something big with Bitcoin. Maybe governments are planning something big with Bitcoin while they leave the dollar behind and only buy cryptos from now on. And when I first heard about cryptocurrencies years ago, people were already saying that Bitcoin could eventually surpass gold. And I'm sure you've heard that many times as well. Back then, for example, they said the price would have to rise to over $800,000 per coin in order to surpass gold's market capitalization. And these weren't fortune tellers, just people imagining how things could logically play out. They talked about inflation, the collapse of governments, the weakening US dollar, and small countries starting to buy or even mine Bitcoin. And you know what? A lot of that is actually happening right now. Then there was also the idea that compared to Bitcoin, gold would eventually fade into the background. And think about it. If you want to move $1 billion, how would you do that with gold? Would you load it onto a ship or into a plane? And I don't even think it would fit in a plane. Or would you rather have a little device that looks like a USB stick with all your money on it? With that, you can travel the world in an instant, and even better, you can just send it over the blockchain. You can transfer $1 billion instantly online through the Bitcoin network. Try doing that with gold. That's simply not possible. Or with cash. There are also a lot of obstacles, for example, with banks. And about 2 years ago, we heard that many hedge funds were selling their gold papers, that is, these certificates or securities, and putting the money into Bitcoin just in case Bitcoin keeps rising. And if the US dollar loses or has lost 99% of its value against Bitcoin in 10 years and the euro as well, then it makes sense to move some of that gold into Bitcoin to invest in Bitcoin or to move dollars into Bitcoin, doesn't it? We've seen this with ETFs as well. How many times have you read in the news that BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF called IBIT is performing better than the gold ETF? That simply shows which way the wind is blowing right now. You may have often heard in the news that BlackRock's IBIT ETF is the fastest growing ETF of all time. It took only 300 days for it to become as successful as the largest gold ETFs, which took 1,600 days to reach that level.
What has happened since that recommendation? Is that recommendation being followed? What types of investors are looking at it? How do we go from that recommendation to investors actually allocating 1% to 2%?
Yeah, so just I think to set the stage for what model portfolios are and how they work for some in the audience. Basically, the idea is to support financial advisors in their journey to be able to build better portfolios, more optimized portfolios for their end clients. And so model portfolios have become a very powerful tool to help financial advisors do that. At BlackRock, we have a very significant asset base in the model portfolios that we build and then equip our wealth advisor clients with. And one of those portfolios, as you noted, in February this year, so just about 3 months ago now, added Bitcoin as an allocation in the 1% to 2% range. This was a model portfolio that includes alternatives in it. And so that was, as you mentioned, I think a significant development. That was not a sudden reaction to any one thing. That was the result of multiple years of analysis and research by the team that manages those portfolios.
There are also rumors that the United States wants to sell a large portion of its gold reserves in order to buy Bitcoin. There's even a company in the UK called Bluebird Mining Ventures. It's a gold mining company and has announced that it plans to convert all future revenues into Bitcoin. And that's pretty crazy. They want to be the first publicly listed mining company in the UK to pursue a Bitcoin-first strategy. That's a big step because they founded a company that mines gold and silver, and now they want to invest their money in Bitcoin instead of putting it back into their business. I'm absolutely speechless because I don't understand how much more the market can take. We should be waking up every morning and seeing that Bitcoin has gone up at least 8 to 9%. Companies that have announced in the last 6 months that they are investing in Bitcoin, buying Bitcoin, have seen their stock prices rise by 70 to 140%. MicroStrategy, for example, has seen an increase of 3,000% in 2 years. And it's really crazy how many companies are currently buying Bitcoin or announcing that they're going to do so. And yet the price doesn't really seem to be taking off and rising. So let's take a look at this together, step by step, and I'll explain to you what's going on. First of all, you've probably heard that companies like MicroStrategy and BlackRock want to buy hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin this year. MicroStrategy even has the goal of owning between 1.5 and 1.8 million Bitcoin by 2027 or 2028. And that's not all. Almost every day we hear about new companies that want to invest millions or even billions in Bitcoin or are already doing so. Just last week alone, several companies announced that they are investing $500 million, $800 million, $1.4 billion, or even $5.4 billion in Bitcoin. There's even a gold company we talked about that wants to convert all its future profits from gold and silver transactions into Bitcoin. And that's just totally crazy, isn't it? But now you might still be wondering, Why isn't the price skyrocketing when we see all this, when so much money is flowing in? A major reason is price manipulation. There are powerful players in the market who can artificially keep the price low, often so they themselves can buy in cheaper, like BlackRock, for example. It sounds nasty, but unfortunately that's how it works. And yet, there's still a problem for them. Bitcoin is much scarcer than stocks. While companies often issue hundreds of thousands or even hundreds of millions or billions of shares, with Bitcoin there are only about 1 million left that can still be mined. And that's really not much, especially when so many companies want to get in and keep buying more Bitcoin more than is mined each day. And at some point, this manipulation has to reach its limits, simply because there just aren't enough Bitcoins available. And Cynthia Lum has even suggested that the US should buy 1 million Bitcoins. And to be honest, that's probably not going to happen. They won't be able to pull that off, at least not that quickly. They would need a huge plan for that, and implementing it within the next 1 to 2 years is very unrealistic. There are simply too many political and economic hurdles to make that happen. So no, it's very unlikely that the US will ever own 1 million Bitcoins, even if the idea sounds exciting. The question now is, when will we see one Bitcoin worth $1 million? And that's really hard to say. The scarcity of Bitcoin and the growing demand could eventually drive the price way up. So if more and more companies invest such large amounts in Bitcoin, it could happen faster than many people think. But there are also risks and uncertainties. After all, no one knows exactly how the market will develop. Basically, it could still take a few more years before we see such prices. But at the current pace, I wouldn't be surprised if it happens sooner than many people can imagine. And you may have already noticed, but a lot is happening right now in the world of Bitcoin. In recent years, more and more large companies, universities, and even governments have started to take an interest in Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, I had a conversation with the sovereign that was interested in the ETF because they wanted to get ahead of the US buying it.
And it was just the faster, easier button. I do think they'll end up buying both. If you look at the gold market, for example, that's exactly what you see. People own gold ETFs and they own gold bars. The same thing is going to happen here in crypto. So I think it's probably more likely that more sovereigns will go direct, but you'll definitely see more than one take the ETP route. It's just incredibly convenient, incredibly low cost, and allows you to execute very quickly without having to set up the custody side of the business.
For 14 years, hardly any company wanted to have anything to do with crypto or Bitcoin, but in the last 2 years, that has completely changed. At first, there were 3 major companies that said, yes, we're getting into Bitcoin now, buying Bitcoin, and so on. And now, not even 6 months later, there are almost 30 new companies. One has even announced plans to invest $800 million in Bitcoin. And that's just totally crazy, isn't it? And if you're interested and want to build financial independence through Bitcoin and crypto, click the link in the description below the video. Watch the video, it's free. Dealer. Also click the link if you want to secure your crypto to store it offline, which I definitely recommend. And did you know that US universities like Harvard, Yale, and Brown have been buying Bitcoin since 2016 or 2017? Yes, it's totally crazy. Their endowments are now also grabbing huge amounts of Bitcoin ETFs, and it doesn't stop there. Sovereign wealth funds and governments are not only buying ETFs, but also real physical Bitcoin, and some are even engaging in Bitcoin mining themselves. And we keep hearing news like this over and over again, and then suddenly the CEO of BlackRock, Larry Fink, says, if the US doesn't get its debt under control, Bitcoin could replace the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. And that's just totally crazy. What was said there?
If you're frightened of your debasement of your currency, or you're frightened of your economic or political stability of your country, you can have an internationally based instrument called Bitcoin that will overcome those local fears. And so I'm a big believer in the utilization of that as an instrument. And so if that becomes true and you see that it could be a proper hedge against maybe, say, securities or equities, the question is, could you see a 2 or 5% allocation? I was with a sovereign wealth fund during this week, and that was the conversation. Should we have a 2% allocation? Should we have a 5% allocation? If everyone adopted that conversation, it would be 500, 0, 600, 0, 700, 0 per Bitcoin. I'm not promoting it, by the way. That is not my promotion.
What is actually happening here? It feels like something big is about to happen, that we're going to witness something major. There aren't enough Bitcoins out there for everyone. There aren't even enough Bitcoins for every millionaire or billionaire in the world. And just imagine, if you have only 0.01 Bitcoin, you own more than billions of people, and with 0.28 Bitcoin, you're already among the top 1% of Bitcoin holders. That's pretty crazy. So if you're still thinking about whether you should get in, remember, the big players like BlackRock are grabbing more and more, and the supply of Bitcoin is limited. So take action.